Most creators, they just take contracts from the brands. And I feel like a lot of the language I see is very predatory. A lot of the contracts I see is you're writing absurd language, hoping I won't read it.
Welcome to the Creator COO, the show where we surface the operators behind your favorite content and creators. I'm your host, Matt Estes. Today's conversation is with Amanda Marcovitch. Amanda is the business manager behind the success of Youshaei, a creator with an impressive 400,000 YouTube subscribers. Under Amanda's management, John has seen his YouTube channel skyrocket with a staggering 300 million views in the past year alone. And she has cultivated lucrative partnerships with brands like American Express, Google, HubSpot, and Microsoft. In today's episode, we unpack the layered responsibilities of the Creator COO role, from driving operational efficiency to navigating brand sponsorships. We discuss strategies and best practices for effective vendor management and team coordination, and we explore the key traits creators should look for when considering a COO partnership. So with that, I bring you Amanda Marcovitch. Amanda, thanks for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Matt. Happy to be here.
One of the missions of this show is to focus more of a spotlight on the operators behind your favorite content and your favorite creators. The creator's always in the spotlight, so now it's time to put Amanda in the spotlight.
Yeah, it's my turn finally, right?
Exactly. Yeah. On that note, then maybe we could start out with a little bit of context here, and I'd love to hear a bit more about in the context of that partnership that you just mentioned. What is your role today? What do you do?
So I basically run the entire business. That's not, John focuses on the content, the scripts, the editing. But this is a business we're running. So that means anything from I'm negotiating all these contracts. Some of them are 100 pages long. I'm redlining them. I'm making sure he's protected, that his likeness isn't being used in a way that I don't approve of, that the brand deals are fair, that the posting agreements are fair. I'm doing all his billing. I'm setting up KPIs to make sure our costs and our budgets are set up so we can run a profitable business. I'm checking the production schedule to make sure we can deliver on time. To make sure our brands are happy.
Sure.
And also hiring, compliance. Anything that goes into running a business from start to finish, really.
Yeah, it's a long laundry list of things that I'm sure that has to happen outside of whoever's on the camera creating the content. Who is John, and what's your relationship to John?
Yeah, so for me, it's we're married, so there's that relationship there. But I also run his business, and I think you'll see a lot of creators or even just people in media have a family member on the business side of their operation. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, here, I'm not just protecting his business, right? His business is his likeness, it's who he is, it's who identity. And I don't know that there's a lot of people who will do anything to protect him in the way I can. And if you look at agents or other types of people in this business, I'm not motivated by commission. And there's a lot of deals where I'll say, I don't think this is good for your image. I don't care what the pay is. I'm in it for the long haul. And I think that setup is super important. And the other part is the commitment that's required. Sometimes I'm working 10, 12, 100 hours a week. Or if he has a last minute shoot, I'm running around to find camera string at 6:00 in the morning. Or there's nothing I won't do to make sure he's successful. And I think you need to be an equity partner, or you need that type of motivation to have that type of commitment. And, on the other side, not to agents are fantastic. They bring us deals, but a lot of times they're not set up with the right motivation to have that dedication. So, I think both those things come into play.
I want to unpack that a little bit. You said some really interesting things in there. So I think the three things I heard, one was about trust.
Yeah.
There's as spouses, there's a high level of trust in your relationship.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And then the second thing that you mentioned was, I think it was really about like alignment to business outcomes. So, and I agree, by the way, I talk to hundreds of creators a year, and I see dozens of, spouse or other family tight relationships between creator and creator operator. It's really interesting. But that second point was about like the alignment to business outcomes. And I guess if you're a family member or a spouse, then you're sort of definitionally equity incentivized, which is a
Yeah.
great way to
Yeah, I'm looking for
align.
long-term wins. I'm not looking for like short-term commissions. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you? And the third thing I heard in there was sort of about like dedication and work. It's like you're sort of aligned in this mission, which I imagine drives you, and
Yeah.
because you're incentivized the right way through equity, and there's a high level of trust, then you're going that extra mile to do the work,
Yeah,
whatever it takes. I think is sort of how you phrased it.
yeah, and the other thing I didn't add is actually just making strategic decisions. I think it'd be really hard to have the type of influence that I have. When we decide, let's say we spent 40K making a video in terms of, editing and producing it and script writing and brand deals we had on it. And we'll say, we shouldn't post this. It didn't come out the way we like it. It doesn't give the right message. And I can make that call. And I don't think there's a lot of people John would listen to who would say, yeah, you're right. After all that investment, so I think it is trust, but also I'm sure, there are people who work with great COOs who do have that trust. I'm not saying it has to be that way, but I think that's hard to have that influence
Yeah,
on a creator if you hire somebody, and
sure.
so my voice is
There's
equally
something
heard.
about
And
you have enough
yeah,
trust such that you can
yeah,
maybe push back on the creator, maybe
yeah, or
you're
like, yeah.
or he knows that you're fully there to support him regardless of an outcome of a project or something like that. Totally makes sense to me. How did you get into what is your background and how did you get into this role as the
Yeah,
what, what,
so
what would you call yourself? Would you call yourself a business manager or a
I
COO?
call myself a business manager just because I think I manage the business. A Creator COO is a good name. Partnerships is a part of it. So, but I like the COO title better. It sounds better. So thank you for
Fancier.
that. Yeah, I might change my title. But I've been doing this for about a year full time. 2 years, a year before that, a little bit more part time. But the truth is, I've been doing this for over a decade. My background's in real estate. I worked for CBRE, for Cushman, for JLL, managing hospitals, the Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco, with $20 million budgets. And you'd say, what does it have? What is similar about those two roles? But it's really the exact same thing. I couldn't have had better training and better skills in terms of running a whole operation, negotiating real estate leases, reading long 100-page leases, and realizing the implications of legal language and all the accounting and financial side of running a profitable business. So it's just the terms that are different. But I had unbelievable training, so I felt like it was meant to be.
So you had all this experience outside the creator
Yeah.
economy, presumably that you could bring
Yeah.
in, and you found it very applicable.
Yeah, and I really found those skills trained me for this, undoubtedly. So,
One
yeah.
of your situation, while you're not the only obviously familial
Yeah.
relationship in this type of setting, it is still I think a bit outside the norm. And I talk to a lot of creators who are looking to hire a business manager.
Yeah.
And I do recall, I think last time we chatted, you mentioned that I think you would look to hire an outside business manager at one point, right?
Yeah.
It, any thoughts on that experience or any words of
Yeah, I mean, I
advice
think
coming out of it?
it's hard. I definitely don't want to say anything bad about anyone we've worked with in the past, and there's a reason I'm doing this role today, because it is very hard to find that level of trust, like I said. But if I wasn't around, and I asked John this question, like, what would you do if you didn't have me? I mean, he'd really look for someone who understood the creator economy, because I'm making judgment calls, strategic decisions about what to post, who to work with to protect his brand, and then who's really operationally sound. So maybe someone who worked in operations in a tech company, in a big business, who really, who knows how to implement processes, efficiency, because
So you
it is
feel like
important.
that operator role at a tech startup could be applicable
Oh,
to the creator world.
absolutely. I mean, and also in particular, I think creatives in general, to be creative is kind of the opposite of being operational, because you're trying to make the best, you have a goal of making the best, most engaging content, which could could take way too long to produce, which would cost way too much. And so, but your goal is to make it as best as possible. And the operator's role is to reel it in and do it in a way that makes sense. So I don't think you can optimize for both of those things at the same time.
Yeah. And there's a lot of examples of that in the tech world. I talk to a lot of creators who are in your shoes and John's shoes who are looking for business managers or GMs or COOs or whatever you want to call them, depending on the stage. And I found from those conversations that there's a lot more demand for good business managers than it seems that there is supply. And
Yeah, I
everyone
will
seems to be
say,
struggling to find some.
yeah,
It's
we do
hard to
get
find
pitched
good help, as they say.
in general in any industry, in any, profession role. I think it's hard to hire and keep good talent.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting that you could see folks moving over from the startup world potentially,
Yeah, so I would say
operators.
even though I do value or we value people who understand media, for my role in particular, I would rather pick someone who had no media experience, who was very strong operationally, than the opposite.
Your creator's the visionary, and then you need an operator partner who can maybe who's more cost focused or a bit more conscientious and down to earth. That sounds like honestly, that sounds like a visionary startup CEO and a startup COO to me.
And
It
and
sounds
you have to
really
think from
similar.
a yeah, and also you have to think from a creator's perspective. I'm trying to the one thing I'm trying to protect on top of his image and our business is John's time, right? The biggest thing we have to sell is his time. We're not a lot of creators go and delve and they sell product and build other businesses on top of their brand, but to maintain that you have to build content, and taking content and scripting it and coming out with good ideas takes a lot of time. He could spend 100 hours editing a 1 hour video. He watches the 10 hours of footage 100 times, tweaking every 5 minutes. So he could spend weeks on one video. And so part of my job is to implement processes to make sure that his time is well spent. So, I've introduced payment softwares, or different types of editing software, or just processes to communicate with our teams better, editing templates. So part of my job is I'm trying to make him more efficient, because I know, his time is valuable. And to add on that, in an ideal world, he's doing all these other things. He's taking meetings. I want him to do nothing but film on camera, because that's the only thing that's irreplaceable. So I have to get him to let go, and we're working on that. We're making progress, and it's hard
Yeah, I
because
was just going to ask how does he feel about that? And how does and
it's hard.
you're this efficiency driven mind,
Yeah.
super thoughtful, very operationally savvy. How does someone like John, who's maybe more creative, more maybe less conscientious, how does he react, and what's that dynamic between the two of you like?
It's hard, but he realizes it's necessary. And, the familiar relationship helps in that way, because one, I say, you're not doing this for fun. Okay. I know you want to give people creator advice and you're passionate about helping people in the space, but this is also your career and you're trying to make a living. And, when you start, you're kind of spending a lot more than you're taking in, because brands don't want to work with you until you reach a certain size. And, there's a lot of investment. He was taking his entire salary for years and investing it into our channel. And, now we're starting to make money, but now we're at 400,000 followers, and it's been a couple years. To bring it back in is, how does he feel about that? He understands it's necessary. It's hard to let go. So I'm bringing this up with him is, I'm saying, let's delegate one video. Let someone else edit the entire thing. I know you may not like it, but let's just show you the finished product, and if it's okay with that. And if it's not, we have the real footage. We could do it again. So I'm kind of testing people to see who we could trust. And if I take him out of that editing space, he doesn't know what he would have done differently. He just knows he likes the final, and he won't get stuck in the weeds.
This is another parallel, I think, to, forgive me, my background is in tech, so
No, go ahead.
I'll keep making these analogies. But
Yeah.
it's another example of I've worked with, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of tech startup CEOs, and you're describing something to me that sounds really familiar from the startup world, which is John is he's very successful, and
Yeah.
he became successful presumably by being focused
Yeah.
obsessively perhaps on his
That's
product,
who
which in
he
this
is.
case is
Yeah.
his content. And so he's having a hard time, or maybe sometimes he has a hard time being a bit more hands off and delegating.
Yeah, for sure. That's similar to tech. In a way that it's not, is that you feel like you're putting your love and your image into the world, whereas I think it's a bit less personal when it comes to a startup.
It's a good point.
But
Your product is you, it's your
the product is
face.
you, yeah, and so that's more sensitive, but it definitely is a similar feeling. And where the relationship, our personal relationship helps is that I'm like, John, you can't work, 200 hours a week, or like you made commitments to me. We have a kid, like you have to have time to eat dinner, like, and so which is funny, but the fact that what actually helps to explain that further is it really helps that I can come in and say, this is a priority, this is not. I think a lot of like maybe spouses when they're like thinking their husband works too much or whatever, like don't have the means to say, don't know what's going on. And I could say, no, today you could like disappear for a week. This is a huge business opportunity. I don't want to see you work around the clock for this week. I value this a lot. Another time I could say, I don't care about this deal that much. My personal time with you is more important. And I could make those calls and he trusts me that I'm putting the business as a huge importance in our life as well. So that actually helps our marriage, I would say.
Interesting. That's a very unique. It's a very unique dynamic to the spouse business manager arrangement.
Yeah.
The you talked a bit about. So you talked a lot about like sort of driving efficiency. Could you double click into that? Like, how do you measure efficiency? Like, do you have any metrics that you look at where you're like, I don't know what they are, cost per video or whatever it is.
That's what it is. I have cost per video. And I'm still working on that. The cost per video is a big one. I had all our vendors structure invoices in a specific way, listing the exact amount of hours and dollars spent on every single video. And I put that against the brand deal. So I'm measuring profitability.
You're measuring return on investment. That's all. That's
what I'm doing.
Got it. So you're just to double click. So you're you're measuring very closely the production cost inputs, dollars and time spent, and presumably John's time too, and then comparing that to the brand deal.
Yeah. So every vendor I onboard, right, I get their W-9, their banking information, and on their invoices, I say, you have to specifically say what's the title video you worked on for every thumbnail, for every video shoot, for every editing hour spent. I also measure the intro of the video edit versus the long form, because the intro is much more, it takes more time for a short clip, because they have to, go through the entire footage and do something in 30 seconds.
How do you know if do you have an efficiency target? Like, how do you know do you have a benchmark or something? How do you know if
we're not there yet right now, because the videos just have to come out. Sometimes we still decide to do shoots that we'll lose money on. For example, we just shot Dude Perfect in this amazing studio in Arkansas, like 6 cameras, very fancy set. So, and that's going to be a loss, but like that's a huge interview and we're super psyched about it. And that's going to be good for his brand, I think. Generally I'm trying to go for 50% profitability in terms of, and we do hit that. Sometimes we do better than that. Sometimes we do worse, but that's about my benchmark.
And so this is a 50% profitability
on top of cost
per video metric.
Per video.
Okay.
Clear though, that doesn't include our fixed costs, right? I'm measuring variable costs because we have a lot of people on staff.
Sure.
That are
like a contribution profit, like
that are regular expenses that aren't variable costs with the video. I think now we're finally like hitting the ground running and getting lots of brand deals, but this is relatively new for us. I mean, we just started 2 years ago, really a year ago when I came in, I started doing these brand deals. And so I've been doubling our cost, our sponsorship amounts by double every quarter.
Oh, wow.
But like I said, John's about at 400,000 on YouTube, so we're still plenty of room to grow.
So you are really in growth mode.
I'm in growth mode. So I can't speak in the long run if that's true for us. And in a year, we started really low and, keep going up and up and up in terms of cost. And beyond that, I would say, if you're talking about long-term relationships with partners, I just value long-term relationships with partners across the board for multiple reasons. I mean, one, it takes a long time to get to know someone, to trust someone, to really speak to the brand in a way that feels authentic. And I don't just want to push products. I really want to particularly support brands that we use, that we believe in, because I want to be a fair endorser of those brands. And I don't want to negotiate with a million people too. It just takes more time away from me. So I value my time. If I know you and I know the product, I can do a renewal on a new deal and super, super quickly, right? And
Yeah,
And
speaks to the value of
yeah,
that brand
and
retention over time.
and beyond that, I just we also value authenticity, right? If I'm pushing the same product of like the same feature of a bunch of different companies, I just look at like a I don't know, a sleazy salesman or something. Like I'm taking any
And
money someone gives me, I'm just gonna.
that's gonna detract from John's brand.
I don't. Yeah. So it just long-term relationships are just a win-win for everyone. So ideally, we want brands, several brands in different verticals that we can work with on a long-term basis, and that's the goal.
I wanna go back to the creator COO role.
Okay.
One of my observations is that the creator COO persona, again, whether it's called COO, business
Yeah.
manager,
Whatever. Yeah.
or anything else, it's pretty undefined. And I've got this idea. I think sometime in the near term, I'd like to open source a job description for
Yeah.
what does this person actually do to help other creators have a starting point to hire. If you had to write like 5 or 6 bullet points with yourself as a frame of reference for what what that job description might look like, what would those, I don't know, 5 or 6 bullet points be?
Yeah, I think I would frame it similar to what I said earlier. If you worked in operations at a startup or a different company, right? Have you run a P&L and financials before where you can measure profitability, like coding invoices, compliance? Like I set up all our billing systems because like a lot of these creators, they don't even know the most basic thing of where to start with that kind of thing. Or like make sure we have proper insurance, with all these like lawsuits going on against creators, especially for FTX and things like that. I'm really keen on the right
So
insurance.
there's sort of this legal and administrative layer
Yeah, and
as
then in
well.
terms of legal costs, a lot of these creators, we speak to other creators all the time because I have my instincts, and so I'll talk to like other people in this role, what they did with the creators they're sponsoring because I don't know everything and I want to get information. Oh yeah, and the thing I was saying about legal, a lot of most creators, I was asking other creator COOs in this role, they just take contracts from the brand because a lot of brands are big companies and they'll take brands, and I feel like a lot of the language I see is very predatory. And not even, I understand you're trying to protect your interests. We want to protect ours. But I feel like a lot of the contracts I see is you're writing absurd language, hoping I won't read it. That's like, and to go into the operational soundness of that, since I have legal training, I'm not a lawyer, but I do a lot of legal work. I'll hire an entertainment lawyer that works with influencers to maybe like review certain sections or, so I don't get like 100 hours of billables, but that's how I operate.
Makes sense. And
Yeah.
so like 5 bullet points. So the first
Oh,
was
sorry.
expense management, back office finance, big part of your job. The second was sort of
Processes.
legal and compliance,
Yeah.
the sort of legal administrative work. The third I heard you mention was like vendor management and people management,
Partnerships is also a big one.
and then partnerships and negotiation.
Yeah.
Anything else that
And
you would
also,
add?
in general thing, critical thinking, strategic decision making,
There's this
more,
whole strategic partnership layer.
yes.
What's the direction of this business? Where should we take the revenue streams?
Yeah.
What are the markets with the biggest opportunity?
Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty good job description.
Oh, yeah, I think
I
so.
might steal some of that stuff and we'll open source
Take
it.
it. It's all yours.
When did you and John know that it was time for a business manager? Like, was there any particular pain, any excruciating pain that you were feeling in the business?
It just needed to be done. I'd say he was getting all these inquiries from brands because he was growing, and the role needed to be filled. I would just say someone needed to do it. It's and just sorting through it. Even if you're a small creator, like I was doing small brand deals at 10,000 followers, but you still get so much inbound just from people wanting to send you a free product or. So you really have to have good judgment skills on, or like who you want to be affiliated with, and yeah, as soon as you have a small following, like your inbox starts flooding, and you gotta just figure out how to get these deals done.
So it sounds like that was really the first pain point for you was
Yeah.
you started getting all this inbound
Yeah, and he was missing
and
opportunities because you know.
And you felt like you were missing out on all this opportunity because you just couldn't handle the
Just
inbox.
sat in his inbox. He didn't have time to look at it. I was like, you know, oh here, look, I found a $10,000 deal just in your junk box. Like, you know.
Do you find, for other creators like John, do you think the pain point do you think the pain point that motivates them to find a business manager is similar, or are there other, I don't know, other pain points you would anticipate?
And you mean when to bring someone on?
Exactly.
I mean, for us, it was the brand deals, but I think that's the biggest one because a lot of creators don't realize the operational side of it. But also, I think from the beginning, like setting up your business structure, right? We have an S corp. You know, John had an LLC before. I changed the structure of the business. How are you doing? You know, do you have separate business accounts, the right credit? I think just setting up a business in a way that's right. And a lot of creators, like I don't know if are you Venmoing people, like, you know, to pay your. I think people do that. They probably just that, you know.
Yeah, I bet a
So
lot of people do just pay through Venmo.
yeah, like you know, I won't do that. I need a proper invoice. I need a matching W-9. All these, you know. So
You got to
I,
one
I
day you
think
got
that
to pay
is a big
taxes.
pain point to answer your question. But I think creators don't realize the pain point because they're just doing it
Mm,
half-ass.
that's
But
interesting.
yeah,
So part of what you're saying there is there's all these operational hurdles, but I guess if you're a creator and you've never
yeah, maybe you
been
don't
an
know
operator like
that
that, you might not
it
even
is a
be aware
hurdle.
that
Yeah,
those are a problem.
yeah. Like, what are you going to do? I mean, there's all these articles in the New York Times like about creators and taxes. Like, you know, I have every single receipt. I mean, I'm intense. I admit, you know, but I have like receipt tracking software. I have the whole, you know, I set it up with John. He just takes a picture and puts it in his WhatsApp, and then I get the receipt sent into my QuickBooks.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's a good point though. I think
yeah,
part of your point there is there's all this stuff that has to happen in a properly run business, and
yeah,
a lot of creators, I imagine, probably just aren't aware of them, and so
yeah.
and I see that a lot with tech startup CEOs, visionary founders too. But to your point, maybe your first point about what your pain point was for you and John, having an inbox flooded with opportunities that you're missing out on because you can't handle them. I can see how that's something that pretty much anybody can get that and feel that pain right away.
Yeah, my other concern with that would be like just because you can close them, like I talked about all my redlining and like are you vetting them properly? Are you just looking at the dollar amount? You know, so that's also important. I don't think a lot of creators would necessarily feel that pain point if they don't think about it. They're just, you know.
How many? I'd love to get a picture of how many people you're working with as a team, as an organization on a daily basis. So, and you don't have to go into specifics if you don't want
I
to,
guess
but
yeah, about 10.
how many brands are you working with simultaneously, and then how many like vendors, contractors are you working with?
I mean, I guess it depends on, you know, we have thumbnail design. A lot of people are on a contract basis. Like we can have a couple thumbnail designers. We now have cartoon artists for our newsletter. Few of them there. So I'm not counting those. We have different videographers, and also whenever we have a main videographer in LA. His name is Richie. He's fantastic. Richie Films. But you know, when we go on, we do a lot of shoots in different locations because we want to go to the creators. You know, like I said, we were just in Arkansas. So then every time I'm in a new city, I have to vet different videographers and make sure they meet our standards and sets. And so it depends what you count. But on a regular basis, I'd say 10,
Okay.
because you know, and 8 of which are editors. Or, yeah.
10 vendors, and then eight of those 10 are editors. How do you
Yes.
how do you ensure quality? You talked a lot about efficiency, and you've got your metrics for dollars per video and ROI, but I've at least, I mean, I found it difficult sometimes to vet quality for creative
Yeah. I mean,
projects.
it's hard, and sometimes we make mistakes. But you know, we learn from our vendors. In particular, you know, John is first of all has a very critical eye, but all our shoots have, you know, the top of the line cameras, lights, you know, just really, like, yeah, just expensive shoots, and you know, we spend like sometimes 200 hours editing a video with graphics, and we have templates that are a certain style. So I don't know if I have like a concise answer, but it's just caring about the quality of the film and the edits and the time that's put into it.
Do you have any advice on how to go through that process of hiring good talent? I would bet you sort of alluded to, there's some situations where it didn't work out, and then
Yeah.
situations
I
where
mean,
it
I'm trying
has.
to develop processes for everything from hiring to ensuring quality of work. So in terms of efficiency, I care about efficiency, but not never at the expense of quality, right? So if we run into an issue hiring a vendor in a different city, which has happened, now I have a whole list. Okay, we need these type of cameras, we need these angles, we need this amount of people, we need these exact lights. Show me pictures of your set. So I have a document that says, do you meet all these standards that we require to work with you? And in terms of editors, right now I have templates of all our editing styles, our graphics that we use. And so if I was going to vet someone from scratch today, we've kind of developed this with our relationships with our vendors, but I would just give them a test. Here's some footage. I'll share our templates with you. What can you do? Or I'll test them on one video before hiring them, which is what we're doing. We're saying, and we don't have to use it. Well, and I don't call that waste money. I have budget. I call that like R&D, Here's our
You're
like
paying
investment.
that's interesting. So you're paying you're paying the vendors for a
As a
sort of a
tryout.
test example project,
Yeah.
and they may or may not pass, but you think of that as another investment, and it's sort of just a cost of doing business to make sure that you get the best quality that you can.
It's a cost of investment of, do we have good people working for us? And I'm measuring the quality. I'm also measuring how fast they can do it.
So you're fairly new to this role. What well, I guess you sort of been doing this work. You've been a business manager for maybe part-time for about a year before stepping into it. I think you said full-time for a year.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's fair to say that you're relatively new, because
No.
frankly, the space hasn't been around very long.
Yeah.
So if
Well,
you're
the
a
whole
business
business is
manager,
relatively new, but yes.
I don't know that there's a lot of creator COOs, frankly, who've been doing this for longer than two years. But what advice would you give to somebody perhaps who's in the tech startup landscape, who's really into creators, who wants to become a creator COO, or frankly anybody else who wants to make this their career path?
Well, I think a lot of people in tech, like I said, operators have these skills. So that's who should have these jobs. And obviously, I think there's a lot less creators and operations people. Just no one thinks of it as a creator COO or matching these two people together. And I mean, if you're asking like, how do you get into the role? I think you really have to meet these creators. So
Any advice on how
yeah,
to
so
do that?
I would be running and like hitting up all these events, right? I'd go to VidCon, I'd go to VidSummit, I'd go to every conference trying to, meet these people and show them what you can do. Because all these creators, there's a mob, right? Like we were walking in the halls there, and like John could not even, he had to like hide because there was like a mob of people every time he tried to leave the room. But get contacts and just you have to show that
What's
you
the
can.
best way? So let's say that I'm a tech startup operator, and I want to become a creator COO, and I want to get in touch with John,
Yeah.
or somebody like John, but I want to do it in a way that I stand out from the mob, as you put
I
it.
think
How do you stand
the
out?
easiest transition would be like if you work for a company, I think like Uscreen in an operations role that understands the space. Maybe you've worked on partnerships with the creator before. That's like the perfect marriage because you have the operation side and you have the creator space. And maybe there's a familiarity where you've already met before. If you don't have that, like if I was pitching from real estate, I could show like the profitability of how efficiently I've run a business. And then I would say how specifically I can make that pitch and apply to the creator space. It is a pitch, though. I understand it's hard to. There's not that many roles, and you have to really convince someone that you're the right person for the job. It's like a marriage, a business marriage, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and there's not a defined career path yet. There's not like this pipeline of talent in. So I suspect that I'm seeing a lot of people becoming creator COOs coming from very different backgrounds. And I imagine that's probably going to be true for a while. Over time, 2 to 3 years, maybe there becomes a more obvious pipeline of talent.
I think though, even if you don't look at creators in particular, just any job, right? I don't even like the way it necessarily works, right? You have to climb the corporate ladder. And just because you have that experience, that doesn't mean that there's other people with different experience who wouldn't be just as good or different for the role. So as the creator economy evolves and there's more creators that have a more defined role, I still don't think that it has to be a specific way. And maybe it's good that people from different skill sets have a chance at this kind of role. And unlike a corporation, right, a single creator could just say, I like this person, I trust this person, and get opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have. So I kind of like that.
Yeah, so there's something here about sort of equitable access, and this is a role where there's a high degree of emphasis placed on being entrepreneurial, and that is a skill set that's you find in a broader swath of people than just,
And that's
I don't know,
great.
people who went to Harvard for their MBA.
Exactly.
There's something nice about that.
Yeah. And I think creators are, in general, it's one of the most equitable or fair ways to rise, because if you can make good content and have a fan base, no one cares about your credentials, right? It's, do you engage with your audience and make engaging content? And that's it. That's the only requirement, which is really hard to do. I'm not saying it's, otherwise I think everyone would be a creator. But it's not based on your resume.
Where do you see this Creator COO role, this business manager role, evolving over the next 2 years, 5 years?
I think of a creator as a business entity, and a big one. Right now it's kind of, there's smaller creators that are growing, but if you look at the biggest people at the top, right? Like we just did a Rewired at the University of Arkansas with Walmart, and they're doing major partnerships to sell products at Walmart. Mr. Beast has his chocolate bars, or like Logan Paul's Prime. Dude Perfect just launched a streaming service. So these are becoming big, big businesses. And I think this COO role is going to evolve the same way you need a COO at a major corporation. I think, that's the way this is trending.
I want to try a hypothesis out on you. Get your take on this idea. So I have this idea that, I have this sense more so than an idea that there's this battle going on right now between creators and established businesses. And
yeah, I agree.
In a way that I don't know that everybody that's participating in it is fully aware of it yet. So let me explain this idea a bit. There's, on one side you've got the creators, and they see big business opportunity. A lot of that revenue started with brand sponsorships. Mm-hmm. Many have moved on to selling info products and merch, other high margin stuff. And then there's a smaller subset of that group, which I think is growing really fast, of creators who are thinking about, like, how do I build a long-term, more sustainable, durable business? So you think of this as a creator like Dr. Mike launching a healthcare services business, or even like franchising primary care offices, or and I think we've seen this a little bit with, like, some of the creators out there launching like CPG products.
I think creators are going to win this battle. It's definitely a thing, right?
The battle on the other side is, or the approach on the other side is, you've got these established businesses who are bringing in-house creators, and
that's how they compete. That's what they need to
they're
do.
trying to, and they're both competing over. I think, my sense is that success, over the next 5 to 10 years, is going to be won by whoever controls the audience and the communities.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, right? Traditional media can't sell, like, not in the way that creators can sell. People engage with their favorite creators every day. They feel like they have a personal relationship. They want to support those creators through their products. And Walmart's not stupid, or companies like that, right? They're partnering with creators because it's wildly successful. And so I think creators, they're taking away media budgets from traditional media every day, from other businesses, and you just can't compete in marketing those products, the way creators can. So I think the only thing to do is embrace it. That's
Have you and
personally
have
what
you
I
and
think.
John considered launching one of these more sort of, I don't know what the exact right way to phrase it is, but these sort of more durable sort of core economy type businesses? So for example, have you ever thought about launching a software business or launching a services business or
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're launching courses already.
Mhm.
We are thinking about software and all, but the thing to be mindful of that too is one, I think you have to be really established to do that because the only way to keep selling your products is to have engaging content and your audience connect with you. And running an entirely separate business, leaning on your brand, is a business of itself. So, do you have that capacity? Are you going to run it well? The worst thing you could do is run a product and it's a disaster, and then your
It's
brand is
risky.
tarnished. It's risky. So I think it's only advisable for, I guess, creators that know they have the capacity, the right talent in place, and they're of a certain size and scale. Because otherwise, you're wasting your time. If you're going to set all this up and put in this type of investment, you know, you need to be able to sell it.
Yeah. So you see it as an opportunity, but it's going to take a lot more investment up front,
At a
probably
certain
than maybe selling merch or a course. It's
at a certain I
risky,
mean, if you want to sell a couple t-shirts like to your fans, like that's not what I'm talking about. Like
right?
sell some merch, you have some loyal fans, even as small creators you could do that. If you're like opening up a factory or like hiring an engineering team, I think you have to have budget and you got to be big.
And so this goes back to the battle. It's you've sort of got. So if you think about the next 5 to 10 years, the battle being over the audience and the community. On one side, you've got the creators who are partnering with Creator COOs, who are better at the audience thing. They're better at the community thing. They're closer to owning it, but maybe they're a bit more deficient on the operational side. On the other hand, you've got these businesses who are
Yeah.
perhaps used to more complex operations, bigger operational teams, but they're really bad at audience and community. And my sense is, I don't know that I don't know who's going to win. My sense is that if all of that
My
equity value that's going to get created is going to accrue to the creator, it makes sense to me that the Creator COO is going to be a really big part of that story.
I think a lot of people, if you have I guess in my case, right, if you're supporting a creator that has an audience and you have someone who understands operations, I feel confident I could figure this out. Like if I wanted to sell merch, like, I would source it, I would hire designers, I would figure it out. Even if I don't have all these skill sets and I make some mistakes for sure, but it's not rocket science. So
It
I
is
think in
not
that
rocket
sense, even
science.
even though like another company I'm sure they do have better, you know, do have operations and like infrastructure in place that we don't have, but that comes at a high cost. So for me, I would say, okay, what does this cost, and how does it outweigh the time it would spend for me to figure it out and get the right partners that aren't as expensive? But the real value for me to partnering with somebody was, is it a brand that I can work with that's like a beloved brand that's like, I don't know what's an example of that, but like just an established brand that partners with a creator where they already have a brand loyal following, so it's kind of like a collab with a brand. I think that's really valuable. And then I also think it's really valuable if like a big company has distribution. If you want to sell a product, they have distribution everywhere. Well, I can't build
Sure.
that, you know.
Sure. Like getting your product into retail at a place like Walmart.
Yeah, yeah,
Built-in
exactly. So that, yeah,
distribution.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
And
those two things are really valuable.
back to that idea, I think there's my sense is there's some ways in which it's true that there's this battle going on between creators and established businesses over this huge market opportunity. But I could also see some ways in which they're collaborators as well, and I'm very interested to see
Yeah,
how like
exactly.
these.
And they are, and I love that. It's kind of it's a win-win for everyone, and there's that's a great partnership, and it
I'm
works.
seeing some early signs of these sort of creator partnership for equity type deals that I think are really promising. I don't see them a lot. I don't see them frequently, but I am seeing them more and more often
I
as
think
every
it's yeah,
quarter
it's also
passes.
just a choice. Like, do you want to spend all this time or maybe like years figuring it out, or can you just like sign it, get it done, and have someone else manage it for you? But it just depends what's important to you, you know. But again, it's just a trust. It's also a trust thing. They're using your face and your name to sell, so you're putting your stamp of approval on it.
So we try to wrap these conversations up with one or two really pointed pieces of advice for our audience, and most of our audience they're either creators or creator operators. You've been doing this now with John for 2 years. Any other pieces of advice that you might have for creators or creator COOs who are thinking about going down this relationship and, you know, and tying up together?
I think I touched on, you know, pretty much everything, but my key points are just the biggest one is trust. You know, you're giving access to your bank accounts, your strategy, your everything. So you better this person better be your best friend that you would trust with your life. So I would vet someone like that and who you trust both personally and professionally. And the other thing to remember, right, that most creators don't always realize is while you're making engaging content for your audience, this is a business through and through. And think about that, and you know, in terms of everything you're doing, can you make it profitable and efficient?
Thanks for those words of advice.
Yeah.
And thanks for taking the time, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time as well. This was fun.
I hope we do it again soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Creator COO. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Also, please consider giving us a rating and a review, as this helps other creators and creator COOs like you to find the podcast. This episode was produced by Rebecca Donovan at Uscreen with support from the team at Share Your Genius. It was edited by Chandler Chappell with artwork design by Spencer Marsh. I'm Matt Estes, and you've been listening to the Creator COO. See you next time.